Hello, everybody. We're coming to you from the New Delhi World Book Fair. As always, the stage is amazing. It's the last weekend, which will be here, but the energy is as high as ever. I'm going to cut into snippets of different people which are visiting our stall at this point, and it's wonderful to have so many authors and contributors at this session. One such contributor, which I'm really happy to present, is our author, Somik Raha. He is an expert with computer science background and also in decision making. And what you will not expect is that there's an intersection with philosophy as well. Those three premises usually do not go together, but the concept of decision making is what's standing out to me right now. So, using that as my segue, what made you decide to write this book? And this book, let me just mention, has turned out beautiful. I'm going to show the cover to everybody because it's so aesthetically pleasing. And it speaks to me in a very yin and yang manner, the white and the black, and how it's sort of coming together to represent two very important aspects of life, and the right hemisphere of the brain and the left hemisphere of the brain, very pivotal in experience. So, yeah, the book, Invaluable.
Thank you, Sharfa. This is a wonderful opportunity to talk to you about the book. First of all, you mentioned the cover. The artwork is done by an extremely talented artist that I just want to acknowledge, Anvesha Ganguly. Just remarkable artwork. Yeah. And what made me write the book? So at first, I thought what I'd done in my PhD research at Stanford was just, what anybody would do in their research, and it was just another PhD dissertation. And the story is actually there in the book in the preface that a particular professor once heard me give a talk about my research and said, "Hey, you gotta write a book about this." And I asked her, "Well, what would I even call the book?" As though that was the biggest problem. And then she said, "It would be called Invaluable, Achieving Clarity on Value," which was the title of my dissertation. So that's it. I had the name of the book all those years back. And then I wrote multiple drafts and finally came up with this one. And the motivation also grew and evolved over time. What I realized is a lot of people, professionals in the industry, are facing a very big problem of burnout. So people have wonderful jobs, they have fancy titles, they have everything they need, good homes, big salaries, but they feel hollow inside, and they keep working like that, they burn out. And when somebody burns out, it's a big loss, not just for that individual and their family, but to all of society. And that just struck me that what was happening around me was strange, that why are so many people burning out? And then the second thing is, if you look at the answer to this question, a lot of people have written about burnout. They've given psychology-based solutions, religion-based solutions, spiritual solutions, so on. And I thought about what is my story? Like, my story of motivation around values and decision making was coming at it from a different angle. But even within decision science, which is well established, I had a particular point of view, and I realized after getting feedback that the uniqueness of my message was around counting. That you have the religion of the accountant, which is numbers. We've been counting all our lives, right? The fundamental construct of materialism is counting. Turns out it's not. People say materialism is bad, but if you go really deep into it, where does counting come from? You find that it is intensely philosophical. And when you understand that, hey, this is what I'm doing every single day, if I can just connect with the philosophy of it, suddenly I find a whole universe of meaning. Suddenly, I don't have to go for the retreat. Like, how many retreats can you go to? After that, you have to come back to your work. You have to meet the same people, and you have to engage with the same counting. That counting, which people were thinking that is crushing to their spirit, I suddenly found that no, it's actually your pathway to freedom. And so it's a very strange counterculture story that you will find meaning through what is supposed to be materialistic and soul crushing, but instead is actually freeing and uplifting.
One of the things that did stand out to me when I was going through this book was, like you mentioned, the concept of counting, like how civilization's fundamental step towards becoming a civilization, towards gaining intelligence and sort of disciplining your life was from the start of counting. And that has stood out to us because, like you mentioned, everyone is saying is that, okay, the counting is pressure, not really a pathway. And the fact that you mentioned that kitne retreats lenge, you have to come back to your real life. I do enjoy that you are very upfront about it in your book, especially in the blurb and this cute little warning that you have put over here. where you are telling the readers what they can expect. And I'm going to reiterate it for everybody out there that what you can expect from this book is not an escape from your reality, but rather the path or the ways that you can ingrain yourself with the reality without feeling that sentiment of getting burnt out. Because I'm in my 20s right now working in a startup. I do understand that, how close you might get sometimes, and we need something to change our perspective. That perspective difference is what people think that will come if you escape, if you take time off, if you disconnect from that portion of your reality. But reality does not work that way. It is going to be waiting there for you. So the only way you can sort of move past that is when you move with it rather than move away from it. And that concept has been beautifully explored in this book, because it's very easy to say, aankh band karo, meditate karo, and you'll start feeling calm. But that's not how it actually works. You will have to understand that where you are in this vortex of a universe, how you are able to contribute, and how your pathway is what is literally defined by you, and you cannot feel burdened down with it. And many such concepts are being explored in this book. And my favorite one, which we will start off, Dr. Somik was telling us, that was of the counting factor, like how civilization decided to first take a step about making and quantifying something. Because human experiences, it's not just something that we feel, we need it to be quantified, it needs to be tangible. And unless there is some tangible outcome, we feel like, it's not worth it. I'm doing 10 hours of work, I need to get my salary. I'm putting so many efforts in my exam, I need to get so many marks. So it's a very input and output sort of system. But sometimes the input and the output does not match, or we think that it's not matching. But in the end of the day, everything gets balanced out. That's a rule of the universe, right? Everything balances itself out. Just because we feel it's not worth it or it's not tabulating does not mean that the universe agrees. Our way and our proportions are always set in stone. But there must be some experiences, Dr. Somik, where you felt like your input was not matching the output, where your number of hours input in something is not resulting into what you thought it's going to feel like. I'm pretty sure you have experiences like that, which led you to inculcate and sort of make it in a more relatable note for all of your readers. Would you like to talk about that?
So it's you'll find for most people who have worked for a while, they'll say that it's extremely rare to have an output that is amazing, impactful, and world changing. But
Yeah.
99.99% of the time, it's like you're slogging away, and then you just wake up one more day, it's again slogging away. So that's the normal experience all of us have, right? So it's not anything out of the ordinary. So I'm not going to be able to change that reality for anybody. But what I can do is give a different metaphor. So it's a very mechanistic metaphor born out of the Industrial Revolution. It's a factory. Like you put in so many hours, the factory will churn out certain things. But we are not widgets in a factory. We're unique human beings. So the metaphor I have is, if you're doing some work, let's say in a business, you're running your startup, right? What if you, instead of the factory metaphor, use the garden metaphor, right? The person who plants in a garden, if they're obsessing about the fruits, that's not going to guarantee you any fruits. Like it doesn't help. But
Yeah.
if you want great fruits, you have to think about: do I have great soil? Do I have great seeds? Am I planting these seeds at the right time, giving it enough water and sunshine? And when I've thought through all of these things, done my very best, there is one final step, and that's called faith. Like, I did everything, but I don't know if nature will work or cooperate, and it may not work
Yeah.
out, and that's okay. So that's just how life works, and that's just how work works. Like, you put in so many hours in a startup, and you don't always see the results. Like, hey, this project didn't work out, that one didn't work out, but all the best you can do is plant good seeds and nurture, right? So that nurturing, nourishing metaphor, it kind of lifts the burden off your shoulders, saying, oh, this is how life works, I can be okay with it. And so now, how does this connect to metrics? So if you think about businesses, right, you are running a business, you have to think about profit. Your shareholders will ask you about that. But you know what? Thinking about profits, just like the fruits, is not going to get you the profits. What will get you the
Yeah.
profits is input metrics. And by input metrics, which I define in the book as those metrics that drive productive action. What is productive action? It's that which creates value. So instead of measuring value, or you can't really measure value, that's what I claim in the book, because you can do accounting of value through value metrics like profit, but the input metrics are more like, maybe, are authors served by what we're doing? Are authors able to get their stuff out in a way that they feel is authentic? And if you
Of
do
course.
enough of that, right, maybe some authors might hit it and that might help your business, but you're here for a deeper purpose. There's a voice that you're trying to unlock, right? And so when every business finds what's the deeper purpose, then you realize that the money is in service of that mission, not the other way around. And Disney said this very well. I don't make movies to make money. I make money to make movies, right?
Yeah.
And Ford also said something very similar that a business that only runs for profit should die because it has no purpose for existence. And business will die if you
Yes.
don't make profit, but it's not solely for profit that you should run it either. So
There's this
what I'm
one
saying is very
diagram
old.
also
Yeah.
in your book. There's this one diagram also in your book where the businessman is saying, business is service. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. Like, it is service. Business without people is, well, nothing. You need that input factor, that attachment and the contribution, and your credibility is based on the service that you are doing for the people in your business. So I agree.
Yeah. And you'll find like a lot of people struggle with money, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, am I being selfish? Am I being greedy? And that's true because when you think of it as my personal enrichment, it becomes a little difficult. But the moment you say, no, 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 I need lots of money because I have such a grand mission. I want to unlock so many voices, like say in your business and whatever business anybody is doing, I want to do something amazing because business by definition is service. Then you find that it's not feeding your ego anymore, it's towards flow. And then it
Yeah.
becomes much more easy to live, exist, and thrive in that space.
There was this, I'm just going to jump onto the part that you said about faith and having doing your doing your work without the guarantee factor key, you're going to get it. I think that's the biggest test of being human, where you do your best and you have to let the universe take care of the rest, which is something that most people do struggle with, because like I said, the alignment that you mentioned of productive results, it only happens when your actions are aligned, but just thinking about it does not do anything. And your reality sort of like conforms to your actions as well, not just your thoughts, but your actions speak a lot of it. After you have published this book, like you said, the last step was faith, which pushed you to do this. Are you happy with how it's turned out so far? Like, what's your experience been like as an author? For you have done the inputs, you've gotten the data, you've put in the manuscript, you have your title, all your input metrics are in place, and the output is out there. So, how would you define that output that you're feeling?
It's a really good question. If you look from one lens, like, hey, what did this fellow do? He wrote this book for 12 years, and
Mm-hmm.
not counting the 4 years of research, active research, and plus more research in those 12, 16 years, he produced one book, and that too independently published. And one by one yardstick was like, oh, this sounds like a loser, right? Story. But on the other,
Mm.
from the other perspective, the way I'm experiencing it is, I'm so glad I went this route because every word in this book is authentic. Like if I had not had to spend that many years writing and rewriting, I don't know if I would have liked the end result. And then finding the artist. It took years to find this person, then another year to work through the whole thing. It's like a part of this, my soul is in the book, right? It's like I read this and like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then the typesetter again, the way I found each person on the team was not somebody who would just do it for money, but somebody who resonated with the message and felt, I want to do something I'm proud of. That takes time. And so what I have at the end is something that when I'm feeling low, right, I open the book, I read this and I get inspired, and I can't recognize it as my book. Believe it or not, I kind of like, did I really write this? Because it was a process, right? It's like when you're in that process, something is coming out, but you're not
You're
always in the
part of
process. So when I'm reading it, I'm
yeah,
reading it like any reader would, right? So I'm not
yeah.
the person who wrote this. That was somebody else in a certain process. So in that sense, I'm able to enjoy this book, and that to me is like it's priceless. It doesn't matter how many people are reading this book. It's like when I read this and I'm down, I get inspired. And then of course, it's really nice when I'm talking to friends. It's like, hey, I want to know about your ideas. So like, oh, I got something very well polished. Here, take this. It's the nicest feeling to just gift this book to my dear friends. And I've written this for deep people. So whenever I meet somebody deep, I get so excited. Like, I would love for you to read this because I will learn something from your perspective. It's like you're pulling out the deep threads in the book. That gives me a real high. So it's not volume is not my metric. It's like how many deep people are um, even if I could talk to one deep person who enjoyed the book, I feel like my day is made.
So am I considered one of those deep people?
Absolutely. You're asking great questions. Yes.
All right. You just mentioned, it's a very priceless experience, but I'm going to use that. I'm going to change your words and say that it's a very invaluable experience, so I can segue
Ah.
back to our.
I love
All
it.
right. But it is true, though. The title is very apt because on Instagram or whatever modern forms of content is being spiraled across us, the content is short to the point, but it's also in bulk. And everybody is a subject matter expert, they say. Everybody has opinions and everybody wants to put it out there. But that authentic factor, the credibility factor that can only come from years of experience, from years of putting your heart and soul into it, is not something that can just be, made into a reel. So while
One
I do,
thing, yeah.
yeah.
No, I just remembered one interesting anecdote as you were saying these things. Is I go to the farmers market every weekend with my son, and there's a gentleman there who makes balloons for children, and he does juggling and things like that.
Yeah.
And he and I just struck a conversation. He found out I'd written this book, and then he got it. And then he read it. And then every time I go to him, he's like, so this book, I've read it. And it's actually a hard book. It's not hard in the sense of it doesn't compute, but it's very deep in that it makes me think. And every page I have to pause and think, oh my God, there's a deep insight here. So it's heavy. Like every page has something to offer. It's not repeating the same thing over and over. In some sense, there's a thread, but it's coming out in all kinds of interesting ways. So that comment is like you would never guess that the balloon guy is my reader and he's a deep person. Like I was like, hey, I want to chat with you and I want to see what you're seeing. So that's open. That's been a pretty miraculous feeling.
That's really good because, like I was saying on Instagram, everyone is so busy being relatable. No one wants to
Mm.
be understanding. So, to find a community
Mm.
where you can put it out and be understanding is what reading and writing is for. And that's what I keep reiterating to a lot of our authors who come to the World Book Fair, that, you have made a contribution, not just in terms of words, but you've made a contribution in terms of experience, because you never know who's going to pick up your book where. You never know what they're going to feel, which words they're going to resonate with. And writing is not for a momentary satisfaction ki abhi likh diya ki abhi logon ko pasand aa jayega. You never know where and what part of the world someone is going to pick it up at what time, and you're connected through times and space. It's transcending writing a book like that, and I'm really glad that you chose to write it and put it out there. So all the years that you've invested, I can honestly say that it's been worth it, because maybe being very selfish, I enjoyed it. So I was like, yeah, merely I had a really good experience. So that itself is enough for me to validate your experience. I'm not saying that, in any other way, but it's been really, really wonderful having it around. And like I mentioned, even though it's the age of the internet with the reels and the shorts and so on and so forth, reading is a very serious community. I think there was a recent Shark Tank episode where one of the sharks were like, the reading culture is dying, buying books is dying, not a lot of people do that. And then it's been timed in such a way, somebody made a reel where they shot it towards the World Book Fair, saying how many people are there, how many sales we are making over here. Because it doesn't matter, even if you can get those books on Amazon, people will still come and pick up that book. So what do you think about reading culture right now, and how serious are readers when it comes to picking up books and giving that deep thinking a shot?
I think I think it's true that the medium has evolved. Certainly, I mean we've been um, bombarded with movies in various platforms, and so we find ourselves in front of screens a lot more than in front of books. And even books have moved more online. And that said, you know, I've grown up with computers around me, so digital stuff is so native, and yet it's very ironical that I couldn't get myself to get this book
Yeah,
in an online format because the art is so
yeah,
stunning, the typesetting is so stunning. Like that's the goal I had said. It should be so good I can't take my eyes off it. When it happened, the people are like, "Hey, I don't consume books in this way anymore. Why don't you put it online?" I'm like, I can't get myself to do it. It's so beautiful. How would it be in an online? Maybe I'll eventually end up doing it, But it's just like I want to savor this. Like there's something special about the page in your hand, and I think there are enough of those people still left. Because, and even for me, right? Like I also like love watching movies online, right? Everybody does it, but there'll be days when like I've watched everything that's out there, but I want something to talk to my soul. And sure enough, there are books on my bedstand. Then I select them very carefully, and it's like, okay, I want to read this 1 or 2 pages. And same thing with my book, right? I don't think people would necessarily read this cover to cover. But what might happen is you open it, you see one of those interesting pictures, and like, oh, I'm interested. What? There's a story here. I'll read this. And suddenly it draws you in, and then you close it,
Hmm.
but it opens something for you in a profound way. That's good enough. That's
Yeah.
fantastic, actually. Right? That's how like there are many ways of entering into an opening, and that's the goal. If that can happen, the book has done its job. And I think people still connect with books in that way.
You just stole my next question because I was sort of like, propping you up to mention how you grew up with computers, digital is your medium, and I was going to be like, then why did you choose this? But you stole my question. I'll take that as a good sign because we're in sync. Like you mentioned, it's really nice to have somebody who opens the book and flips through it. What I personally enjoyed about it is that I do not need to worry about a sequence to enter any chapter. I do not need to worry about continuing into 3, 4 chapters to get my takeaway from that particular scene that you've talked about, whether it was talking about, I think there was one where we were discussing the boy who thought that he lived for Germany. I cannot
Yes.
recall the title of it, but yeah,
Yeah.
see, I can just jump into
4, chapter
things.
3. Yeah.
Yeah, because you've used
Yeah.
such visual elements everywhere. And I do
Yeah.
like that, I don't have to worry about context. Kya hoga? Do I need to read 5 chapters before just jumping into it? Because readers are of all sorts. They might want to read it cover to cover, or they might just want to jump in and, resonate with one of the titles and open it up. So I do like all the work that you have put in. It's very thoughtful, it's very engaging, and it is written keeping in mind the readers. Most oftentimes, our authors struggle with changing their voicing to suit readers because we tend to write like how we talk. But from a reader's perspective, that content needs to be consumable. So, what was your writing process like when you were doing your research, when you were into all these decades long worth of experiencing and compiling it? What was your writing process like? My segues
So,
are very nice, no?
yeah, this is a really good question. So, I wrote this book 5 times. This is the fifth manuscript, and the fourth time, um, I gave it to my professor, and this professor shows up in the book. Ron Howard, my teacher, my dear friend, and he said, "Somik, this is great," and he read it in 3 days, and my response to him was, "I think you're the only one who thinks it's great, having a hard time finding publishers." And then he took a deep breath and he said, Somik, all the American classics, they became classics only after the author died. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. So people don't appreciate during their lifetime. So that gave me a lot of detachment, like, okay. And then he told me, there's something unique about your thing. You're talking about things I did not teach you, such as counting. And that's when I realized, oh, I have something unique to say, which is mixed up with a lot of things that are not that unique. So the fifth time, I got very intentional and I worked with this wonderful developmental editor, Jen Listag, who's credited in the book. And we set a bunch of rules, patterns, and this shows up in the preface. And one of the big things there was, I'm not going to talk about anything that's not unique. If you're reading about it in the book, it's because it's not there anywhere else in this form. So that was number
Yeah.
one. And the second was, this is a book that will feel spiritual to you, but it has no mention of God anywhere, and it deliberately will not. And in fact, it will draw its philosophical insights from materialism. So it's a very counterculture book. Usually, people will bring monastic wisdom into life. This is
True,
the
true.
opposite. The monastic side gives the puzzle, but it's solved by accounting. So it's crazy. Like, how could this be? Like, it's impossible. But that's what the book is about, right? And then the third thing is it has this pattern that which I call the sandwich. It starts with the philosophical. Then you get an answer from the counting culture, and then to deepen it, like it's not just enough to get the intellectual answer. You got to feel it. And so the biggest myth I feel in our present time is that counting disconnects you from life or disconnects you from feelings. And I want to break that. So every chapter ends with a breakthrough of feeling. Like you will feel something if you allow yourself to engage with the story. So that pattern repeats itself chapter after chapter. So I came up with those patterns before I wrote. And
Okay.
then that gave me the shell. And the reason for this is if you ask yourself, what is art, right? Art, at the end of the day, is a narrow set of rules that you have to adhere to, like Bharatnatyam, let's say. If people say, I'm going to throw my hands and legs any which direction, and it's not Bharatnatyam, right? It cannot be. You have to be very rigid and structured. But the structure and the rigidity is not the art. It's through the structure that the artist takes you beyond the structure and helps you feel something. So I realized very early on that I had to have a rigid structure, but through that structure, I'm going to transcend the structure and help you feel something. So these were all very deliberate decisions before I started writing the fifth time. And the book is kind of a manifestation of these patterns throughout. So that was the writing process.
Okay, that's beautiful and very well thought out, and honestly, very remarkable. I've dealt with thousands of first time writers, and that is the number, thousands of it. But I have not come across someone who is so disciplined in their approach and so well thought out, because you're not just anticipating an outcome, but you're preparing for it, which again is the whole point of your book. And I really do, like I said, I make nice segues with all of this that's going on. But coming back to the whole sandwich approach that you have while writing this book, is this part of your corporate culture? Is this how you used to give feedback to your colleagues also? Like, Acha
And
Burak, which approach?
a lot of people say that. No, I don't know. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think the corporate culture thing really comes in there. I really thought about because the feelings part of it is a big message of the book, especially if you look at chapter 8, which looks at the science of emotion. It's important, right? I mean, the interesting thing is India has these ancient classics, which the Upanishads, for instance, and they're locked up in mystery. Like, what do they mean? Right? And these were, I don't know if they were meant to be
Hmm.
just treated as mystical. For me, it's more like, no, there is meaning in them, and that meaning is very easily accessible if you have the eyes for it. So, and I've just looked at two or three of these ancient, poems, right? And because they're that deep, like that's enough for you to engage for a lifetime. And the one I'm referring to is this one, which says, "You cannot reach that sense of meaning and freedom through your mind and speech. Your mind and speech will return defeated. Well, then how do you reach it?" And the poem says, you reach it through the feeling of creative joy. And that's very normal. That's just easy for all of us, that when we're creating something, we feel that sense of empowerment. It's like, oh wow, I have actually changed something in the world. Each one of us is a creator, right? And so I mean, in your space, you're supporting creators and you're also creating something amazing, right? It's that simple, that your joy comes from it. And that joy, when it comes, you're not connected to your ego anymore. It's like you're not thinking about your narrow self. It's big. You're connected with everything that's inspiring through your narrow pathway. And that's the magic. It's like this book is about how do you connect to something that feels universal, but through your uniqueness, through your particular idiosyncrasies. And that's quite different. It's like I'm not talking about, oh, just look one way, become uniform, and then you get to world peace. That's not it. The path to universality is through your uniqueness. That's the message.
Okay. Um, I think that I need to deep dive more into your book, and I will definitely be coming back so we have longer conversations. But like you said, experiencing the universality of everything does take time and effort, and there's a lot of contributing factors. When you mentioned chapter 8, and I was flipping through it, I saw this portion where we were talking about how women might feel things differently than men. So the question being, will this book be experienced differently to men and women? What does all your research and experience say?
Kind of funny you asked that. Like, so when I shared some of the results from that chapter, like this is about skin conductance measurement from emotion research that has been well established. I used it in a different context. So usually skin conductance measurements are used if you watch Hollywood movies, right? Lie detector tests or even
Yeah.
Bollywood movies. So it's a very negative psychology. Like you sweat a little bit more when you're lying, and that you can pick it up with skin conductive. But what if you could pick it up for positive emotions, for feelings of inspiration? That's what I was trying to explore, and I saw some results there, which are interesting. And so when I presented it, the response was a little bit gendered in the sense that the men are like, "This is amazing! This is what a breakthrough," and women were like, "You needed scientific data to believe feelings are real. What's wrong with you?" So in that sense, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to stereotype too much, but I think for certain things are more natural to women. Like they like it's obvious. Men seem to have to work a little bit harder at this, like to appreciate and accept feelings. So maybe there's a message in there for men to not just look for data. Like, well, I'm kind of bridge the two, right? I'm saying, hey, if you really want data, the data is there, and here is a scientific way to access that data. If that is the only pathway available to you for feelings, but even any man who's been loved by his mother, wife, or daughter knows what feelings are. But how is it that we don't take it seriously when we are professionally doing something? That's odd. I think feelings are very important in our work, and if we learn how to channel them into our work through what we count, and our counting breaks through feelings, right? That would be powerful. And there's some examples in the book. I think there's a story of a school where they're doing a fundraiser. I think this comes in the chapter Numerous Metrics, where this is the time when I put my daughter in a private school and the fees were high. And then they're doing a fundraiser, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't have the money for this. And so they have the class rep reaching out saying, hey, I'm calling about the fundraiser. And my first answer is, hey, this year is hard. I don't know if I can really contribute anything. And he's like, no, you're misunderstanding. I'm not interested in what your check size is. Our metric is 100% participation, because you're a member of this community. The way you express that community thing is you participate. Whatever your check size, small or big, doesn't matter. And the moment he said that, a big rock lifted off, and I realized, oh my God, that's amazing. That's inspiring. And then I realized I was not even registering. Every time I drove into the school, they had a metric showing what is the percentage participation, 80%, 90%. So I ended up giving a lot more than I would have normally done, because now I've finally gotten over my scarcity mindset and connected to the value of community as expressed through percentage participation. So one simple metric, people will look at how much did you raise. Instead of that, they use percentage participation. It unlocked and connected me to my heart. So that feels magical. Like, it's not supposed to happen that a metric connects you to values, but sometimes it does happen, those miracles. And so this book is about those miraculous metrics.
I think it's also the perception of these metrics, because it's so quantified that people to actually look at the quality of it. Because every metric, when we talk about it, they're always okay. Kitna percentage hoga contribution, like you just said, what's going to be the size of it, and that is an unspoken burden on most minds. No matter what we do, we want to quantify it, but we're so busy quantifying it, we're not really experiencing it, and all the actual ripples that we're sending out in the universe based on our community interaction. So if we sort of stop looking at community like it's there to judge us, measure us, and direct us, but rather to support us and experience the point of civilization and humanity, I think it would be an experience that will transcend time, like I said. And I'm so glad that you chose to participate in one such effort, because here, like you mentioned, it's not about the returns of all the money factor that might or might not come in. Like your professor said, this might only become a classic after we're long gone. But the possibility of it all is what keeps the world running. And before I conclude, I'm going to ask you for one last thing from your end, for your potential readers, whether it's now, whether it's 50 years from now, whether it's 500 years from now. If you had to leave a message for them, what would it be?
I wish them a life of clarity. No, I wish them a life of clarity on value. That's the biggest wish I can leave behind for them. If they are clear on their values, they will have the courage to be themselves. And the world needs people who are clear on their values. Most of the time, I don't believe there are evil people. I just believe there are confused people. And once people remove that veil of confusion and they realize what truly matters to them, they surprise themselves and the people around them with their decisions. And I want more such people on this planet around me at all times. It's like that's why I wrote this book. So we need a lot more such people. That would be my message. That be yourself, everyone else is taken. That's the message I would leave behind.
That's wonderful. And I don't think it would have been put in any better way. I'm so glad that we had this conversation. And before we sign off, I'm going to redirect our viewers in whatever platform they can need, whatever time it might be, that please do pick up this book. It's not about what it is saying, but it's rather how it's saying it. And we can guarantee that no one would have said it in the way it's being said here, and no one would have spoken about the topics, because we're all feeling it, we're all dealing with it, but you're not able to process it. To help you process the actual invaluable nature of life and your experiences, please do give this book a read, and our author would be more than happy to connect with you and hear your thoughts. And we're going to leave those messages on the back of the book and wherever we're posting it, so please do connect with us. It was wonderful having you, Dr. Somik. I really hope that this conversation was as meaningful to you as it was to me. Thank you so much for your time. I understand there's a time difference, and for you to log in here and be with me, I will cherish it personally. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharfa.